In this episode of Sushasan, we have with us the multi-talented, hugely inspirational lady IAS officer who recently retired as secretary to the Government of India. She's made a seminal contribution in the field of school education while being in the services. She's worked very closely with Prime Minister Modi, first in the Gujarat government and then in the Government of India. She's a spiritual seeker and yoga and meditation form a big part of her life. She's also an author, a writer. She's written multiple columns, written 3 books, fiction, non-fiction, humor, and planning to write 2 more. She's an avid traveler and has traveled across the country and the globe. She talks about it all in this episode of Sushasan. Don't miss out this freewheeling conversation with Mrs. Anita Karwal. In the end, you will be left with a feeling of being inspired. Very warm welcome, Mrs. Anita Karwal, to Sushasan. Really happy to have you here and really looking forward to this conversation. And from where you stand, if you were to pick from your side 3 to 5 most critical cornerstones of NEP, and let's talk about school education, what would those be? Because everyone you ask will have different set of things which are important. Of course, everything is important, but from where you stand, what's the seminal kind of heartbreaking things that are there in the NEP? 3 to 5 of them.
For me, the most important and the basis of the entire policy is the foundational literacy and numeracy mission mode recommendation of the policy. This is the first time where we are focusing on this. On the age group of 3 to 8, knowing fully well that that is a time when the brain development is the fastest, and if we do not tap the brain development at that time, we have missed the bus. This thing is acknowledged. In fact, there is a sentence in the NEP which says that the rest of the policy will not be relevant if this is not achieved.
Yeah, we pick that and quote that everywhere.
Yes. So I think that is a very huge amount of work that we have to do, and the policy has come out with it, and we are really grateful that it is the right time and it has come out. Everything from which is required for education for a 0-year-old to an 18-year-old, 19-year-old. By 0, we mean that a child who is just born, about to be born, just born, what are the requirements that the parents need to take care of. So if you look at the NEP, it takes care of access, it takes care of infrastructure, it takes care of curriculum, it takes care of pedagogy, the classroom transactions, the assessments, what the board of examinations have to do, how the institutions have to deliver, how the manpower is to be trained and how their capacity is to be built. It takes care of how governance is to take place, how technology will seep into education and educational governance. So it takes care of a huge gamut of things. Yeah. So if you compare this with the previous policies, you will find that the scope has really enlarged. So, for example, the previous policies have been shorter policies. Let me start with what has happened. So after the policy came out, as you rightly pointed out, we first of all prepared a plan called Sarthak, which we prepared in consultation with the states and with various other bodies like the SCRTs, NCRT, the CBSE, the state boards, etc. Then what we did is, now if you look at the policy in school education, there are 2 aspects to it. There is one aspect which is totally NCF dependent, the National Curriculum Framework dependent. There are others which are independent of the National Curriculum Framework. So we decided that while the National Curriculum Framework is being developed, let us focus on implementing those which are not dependent on the National Curriculum Framework. And as you may be aware, a major chunk of it, in fact, the day I retired, we sat and counted how much of it we have done. 120 initiatives, and I'll just mention some of them. So foundational literacy and numeracy mission called Nipun Bharat, this was launched in 21 July, as you may be aware. And this actually encompasses not only the whole skill-based education approach of learning outcomes, etc. It also talks about play-based pedagogy, how to do assessment, how teachers are to be trained, how local self-governments are to be involved, how parents and community is to be involved, etc. So it's a very comprehensive guidelines that we prepared, and then we followed it up with funding and restructuring the whole Samagra Shiksha program on the 5+3+3+4 basis, ensuring that enough funds go to the states, and then the whole model started. We did a baseline survey, NAS, as you know, the National Achievement Survey, to tell the states where you stand, because this was pandemic and things were a little difficult. And with that, the states know where they stand and they know where they have to reach. So that was the first thing we did. Aside from this, there are several other interventions that we did. First of all, you may be knowing about Nishtha. I'm not very sure if you know. That is the teacher training program. So during the pandemic, everybody thought that we will have to stop it because it was a face-to-face program. We made it a blended approach and online, completely online during the pandemic. The policy says that minimum 50 hours of CPD, continuous professional development of teachers, is a must every year. We ensured that all teachers through Nishtha at least have it. The state governments can augment it with their own training. So that is the second thing that happened, major thing. The third thing was the technology aspect, integrating technology into education. Because of the pandemic, you know, the speed with which it happened. And Diksha, the platform, which was already there, it was developed further. We managed to get something like, I think, over 2 lakh pieces of e-content. More than 45 crore textbooks were QR coded with the e-content. Teachers were trained. Lot of training happened in digital literacy. Aside from this, you know, inclusion pe bahut kaam hua hai. Indian Sign Language को standardize करके we had to come out with a dictionary of 10,000 words. That was completed with the help of the ministry, the Department of Social Justice and Empowerment, the Disability Department. And after that, what we did was we started giving content on Diksha. We have talking books or audio books for visually impaired. We have Indian Sign Language content for the hearing impaired. All this happened during this period. Then aside from that, virtual labs for children to make things more engaging. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there were so many initiatives. A major initiative also happened on the assessment side. The Central Board of Secondary Education reformed its assessment because assessment is now to be competency based. I'm glad to tell you that by 2025, both 10th standard and 12th standard question papers will have minimum 60% items or questions based on competency, because it started in 2020. By 2025, we'll complete it. It's already there. This year, I think 30% ho chuka hai. So all this was things which were not dependent on the NCF. So we have already started it. And we had this outreach with the states during the pandemic, because this video conferencing became a very big thing. So I used to meet the states twice a month. And everything that is new, what is to be done, talking to each state, finding out the gaps, helping them, calling them to Delhi, giving them resources, etc., etc. You know, this first time it is being reiterated, though it is mentioned in the RTE Act. But here in this policy, it is mentioned that the importance of education and in the medium of instruction to be the mother tongue or the language known to the child. I think this kind of reiteration that it should, you know, wherever possible up to grade 5 and if possible up to grade 8, I think this is path-breaking. The curriculum, the whole chapter, you know, there is a chapter 4, which is based on curriculum. And the whole thrust is on skill-based education. What I mean by skill is skills, abilities and competencies, which help a person to take care of everyday real life situations, to handle real life situations. So the whole approach is skill based. So it is not rote based. We are getting out of the rote based and looking at whether the child has creativity skills, whether the child is able to communicate, collaborate, whether critical thinking, whether problem solving is a skill that the child possesses. So the whole learning is now going to be competency and skill based. I think that is huge. And this was much required, particularly in the 21st century.
And if you talk about, on that note, we are at India at 75, India at 75 to India at 100, the Amrit Kal. What are the elements in this that give you hope about the next 25 years for our country?
So what gives me hope is the fact that if you look at the statistics, dropouts have reduced. More girl children are enrolled. I mean, even girl children dropouts have reduced along the way. States are rising up to the occasion and trying to get into the sphere of education in a more serious manner. Technology has equalized a lot of things for children, for stakeholders. We as a country are doing very well. We have firmly established ourselves on the world map. I was recently in the US and UK, and everybody is talking about India, about how India is doing so well, how there is transformation happening in India, and how such a huge country with such a huge population is able to manage to do things, whereas small countries, which are our neighbors, for example, are finding it difficult. So all this, I mean, one is seeing, I'm very hopeful. I see, I'm very positive, I'm very hopeful.